Hi, I'm Zach Harvey, co-founder and CEO of Lamasu. We make Bitcoin ATMs, BTMs, etc. Currently have sold 250 and 90 are operating throughout the world.
Hi, I'm Dominik, working for Bitcoin Vietnam, the first Bitcoin exchange in Vietnam. We are also collaborating with Eli and also with Jonathan on some projects. And yeah, the first Bitcoin exchange in Vietnam, also pushing the community there, and it's quite an adventure.
So I'm Jonathan Rouach, founder and CEO of Bits of Gold. Bits of Gold is an exchange in Israel that has expanded using collaborations to Vietnam, to Germany. We actually, I think, in some constellation collaborate with each other outside of Israel and in Israel. There's a Lamasu ATM at the embassy operated by Bits of Gold.
Okay, great. So I guess the main issue that's really interesting to everyone is what's going on with the legal status of the exchanges around the world. And we'll have a few minutes about it. Let's say what you think.
We can start in Israel, right?
Yeah.
So actually I would like to know how many people here are in Israel and have used the services of one of us. All right.
Wow, nice.
So this is the proof that it is working in some way. So we managed to have a continuity of service, giving people access to Bitcoin, buying or selling. It's not an easy task. So we have to deal with the banks that are still wary of what is this Bitcoin, and it is not very easy to have companies on such a small market continue for such a long time. So here in Israel, the status would be, let's say, orange. It works, but it's fragile, and we're all working to make it less fragile and more robust.
I'd add to this point that the general feeling from the banks in Israel is that they don't like it. And they have tried to stop us from working, try to reduce our capabilities. And because of the fact that Bitcoin is not illegal, and we have the right to make that kind of business, we're still operating, and hopefully it will change soon, and it will be okay.
The operating part should continue, right?
Yeah, that's the plan. What about a little bit in what's going on in Vietnam?
Yeah, so far in Vietnam there's also no official regulation. The only thing you had is so far back in February, the state bank said it's not a legal tender, not a legal means of payment, so basically just copying what all the other central banks around the world also have said. We don't have any issues with the bank, they just don't care. And in general, the state bank is quite skeptical about Bitcoin, for sure. You also have some capital controls in Vietnam, and of course they see that people just could circumvent it.
Maybe they'll start caring when big money starts flowing there.
I mean, basically in Vietnam, people are just doing everything which they want to do. Gold shops, for example, you can exchange your foreign exchange at gold shops at every corner, even if they are not allowed to do so. Vietnam works a bit different in this way. Of course, still we try to do it a legit way. We're also talking to the state bank, and we were also talking to the cybercrime unit of the Department of Public Security. Those guys understood quite well that it doesn't really make sense to go after us, because everything they don't like to happen would happen anyway in the underground. In fact, the underground market in Vietnam is much huger than what is going on our exchanges, because the people are just posting on Facebook, some tech forums, their phone numbers, and so the P2P underground market is probably 2 orders of magnitude higher than what you see going on our exchanges at the moment. And you also have a lot of huge miners from 2 or 3 years back, and they want to stay anonymous because they have invested quite a lot of money, and they also trade just via the trusted middlemen and somehow connected them to BTCE and move the money on secret ways out of the country. And
but what about the regulator and the banks? They don't have the incentive to bring this stuff up from the so-called black market?
The banks themselves are quite interested in Bitcoin. We talked to some C-level executives at the banks, and they're really interested to make some money with it. But they are still hesitating because the state bank, of course, is quite skeptical to Bitcoin, and they don't want to risk their business by going into Bitcoin now. But we didn't face any issues with the banks so far, so this is quite different from the Western point of view.
Zach, what about cash? Any problems?
Well, there's something special about cash, of course, that you don't necessarily require banks to deal with cash. That's one thing that cash and Bitcoin have in common. The use case is peer-to-peer. If I want to give you $5 or 20 shekels, I don't need a bank to do that. I can just hand it right over to you in the same way we do it with Bitcoin. So I think there are two things when thinking about what's happening with banks. Part of them is, there are banks out there that don't like Bitcoin, and then there are banks out there that it doesn't really matter if they like Bitcoin or not. It's just not worth it for them. The only thing the one thing that they're truly concerned about is the regulatory environment. And if they have this Bitcoin thing going on that could screw things up for them, they're not going to get anywhere near it. So we have been seeing certain things, certain Bitcoin businesses throughout the world who have encountered what I call death by bank, which is you have a Bitcoin business, and all of a sudden, your banking relations just get shut down. They're like, yeah, we're not going to work with this anymore. And then what do? It's very hard to have an online service without dealing with virtual fiat. There's no way to really do that, and that's where Bitcoin ATMs have a certain advantage because we use cash. So in any case where cash is preferable to virtual fiat, virtual government currency, our machines really come in handy. So we can have machines that don't need banks at all. When it's cash in and cash out, you can just kind of balance it. You don't need to deal with banks at all. The other thing, in most countries, we've shipped to about, over 40 countries, and there have only been 2 countries where Bitcoin has pretty much been illegal. And we shipped one machine to Ecuador, and about a week after it got there, they basically announced Bitcoin as being illegal because they want to have their own digital currency. And then that machine was later on shipped to Mexico. We had a machine that we shipped to Russia, and the operators of the machine did not want to get into that because they felt that the environment wasn't there. And they shipped the machine to Kiev, Ukraine, where it's now operating. And all the other countries, it's just mostly a matter of figuring out what kind of AML and KYC requirements are required. So as far as the government's concerned, it's usually not a problem. And the advantage of Bitcoin ATMs is that you don't necessarily have to be concerned as much about banking relations.
Sure. You want to say something?
Yeah, so we actually consider cash as a fail-safe mechanism for the entire industry. If the day comes that a bank is creating problems, you know that cash will still be there. But it's true that you need to continue to have a very strict AML regime so that nobody can come and claim, okay, you're using this machine to do money laundering. So coming back to Vietnam, I think one of the reasons for the banks to be less wary of what you guys are doing is that you're applying a KYC regime that has never been seen in Vietnam. So these guys are working to the standards of the international community, and specifically what we implemented here in Israel and coming from the regulation in Europe and the United States. This is something that Vietnamese are not used to, giving so many copies of their identities and stuff like that. But this is something that we see around the world. Slowly, there is no, or there are less and less places where you can do Bitcoin exchange and not reveal your identity. So it's a shift from where we were, let's say 2 years ago, where you could maybe find a place to move large amounts of money with Bitcoins. Today, large focus of what we're doing is to explain to people that this is a very legit business, and if there is some form of doubt, none of these people want to do business with you, and probably you will not find a business that will do business with you. You will need to find maybe somebody off the street, but that's also disappearing slowly. So the focus has become very strict KYC mechanism. We see this in Bitstamp, I think. Bitstamp have now announced that.
Yeah, they did. They're threatening their customers to close their accounts if they don't fulfill the KYC.
Right. So we're actually seeing clients saying, okay, so getting verified at Bitstamp for an Israeli is a little bit more complex. So we want to get verified with you guys and just, okay, we want to ship back the money to Israel through your companies.
We actually did the same thing just the beginning of last month. The banks with the lawyers attached with regulators, they wanted to settle this thing of the KYC. So we had to recollect from all our customers IDs and the appendix of the IDs of the Israelis. Even though B2C is only restricted for Israelis, we are well monitored and watched. Another thing I wanted to ask you guys is, we talked about cash, we talked about the banks. What about credit cards? There's a lot of companies under the banks or beside the banks that move a lot of money with credit cards, and we in B2C are starting to experiment with this, even though it's been really tough. What do you think where this thing is going?
Well, I think with credit cards, you in a sense have the same issues as dealing again with the banks. I mean, you can't have a credit card without a financial institution. So in that sense, credit cards are very different from cash. The other problem with credit cards is, of course, the back charges. So somebody can go and buy Bitcoin with a credit card and then claim that he got nothing in return.
Yeah, but do you think that that's what held the use of credit card till now? Do you think it's going for a solution? It's going to be rethink?
I mean, there's something it's very convenient, of course, about credit cards, especially in countries like the U.S. and Israel, where credit cards are very popular. But I think it has more of the qualities, in a sense, of an exchange than of say cash. So if you have an app on your phone, like a Coinbase or Bits of Gold app on your phone, you can just go on your phone and immediately buy the Bitcoin. There's something I think Circle have just also made it very easy to buy Bitcoin with a credit card. And in some ways, maybe it's quicker onboarding, and there may be some advantages to it. But I think it has many of the same disadvantages of dealing with virtual currency and having to work with financial institutions and not really being able to get to people who don't use credit cards as much.
So that's true. I think there are two aspects to credit cards that you should distinguish. One is inbound and outbound, right? So if you hold money at an exchange and you want to use your dollars, say, I know that there have been solutions to cash out your money using credit cards. This is a very simple way for people to take money out of the exchanges without doing all the international transfers, and that's been, I think, on for a while. And the onboarding part, which is the part that brings people in using their credit card, this is actually, I think, a requirement to have Bitcoin more mainstream. People today are used to not going out of their house, use their credit cards, just send the number if you're online or swipe it, and this is the gesture that people are used to. So today we still have to deal with that, and luckily we have, in Israel, a very nice ecosystem of startups. One of the startups here in Israel, Simplex CC, is working specifically on that subject to green light or red light a specific transaction in foreign exchange. If we at Bits of Gold receive someone new that wants to buy, let's say, $500 worth of Bitcoin, then we will send all the information that we can send to, say, Simplex CC. They will approve or disapprove this specific transaction based on the data that they can gather by themselves or from what we give them. And if they approve, they take the counterpart risk. So there are beginning to be solutions. Of course, all this is for a fee, so you have a trade-off of convenience versus fee, which I think you can probably see that the convenience of people uploading money to the platform immediately is something that people are willing to pay a certain number of percentage.
But part of the reason we at BTC started to investigate this thing is the demand from the customers about credit cards. There's also demand about cash. Generally, I get the feeling that people don't like to do wire transfers. So it's always a question about cash, about credit cards, and I think they're going to get eventually what they need and what they want.
Yeah, the environment in Vietnam regarding this is a bit different because it's really largely cash-based society, so the demand is more for cash than credit cards. Another problem with credit cards in Vietnam is that the numbers of credit card fraud in Vietnam are 5 times higher than the average in the region.
What's the reason in general?
So right now there's no way to buy bitcoins with credit cards with us, but we are looking into a partnership with a payment provider which is established in Vietnam to do these kind of payments via this payment provider, so we don't face any risk with this. Right now ourselves we didn't go into the risk to accept credit card payments because, like I said, credit card fraud is rampant, and it's not, the people who use credit cards also can use cash, which is more safe for us because once we have the cash in hand, it's the cash in hand, no charge.
Did you try to investigate a little bit why the fraud rate is so high over there?
We didn't do our own investigations, but in general, in Vietnam, it's really quite common that people, and you see regularly headlines popping up that large rings of people from Vietnam somehow stole credit card data and bought a lot of stuff in the US and wherever, and they just sent in the persons where they ship the items to, and you have such headlines nearly every month. I'm not sure why it's exactly now Vietnam where this is so rampant,
but just to correct, they have very large amounts of legit stuff. I was addicted to Flappy Bird for 3 months. This came from Vietnam. So it's not just fraud.
Okay, so we can talk about this stuff for the whole day, right? I wanted to see if anyone has questions for us. Yeah, sure.
To Mr. Bits of Gold, I would like to ask, what would it take for us to lower the spread between buy and selling bitcoins? In Israel, I just checked it a second ago, and it was 84%, much higher than in Europe.
Yes. So the question, to repeat, there's a very high spread on our platform on Bits of Gold. Maybe you want the reasons for that and the way to go forward to lower this spread. So the basic reason for a spread at our company, we don't like these numbers. It takes clients away from our platform, so we're trying to change that. The basic reason is trying to predict the direction of the market. We're not an exchange where people bring their dollars or shekel and bring their bitcoins and try to find a price. This is what B2C are doing and doing successfully. We are mostly importing bitcoins from abroad. So most of the price is the price of converting your shekels to dollars and sending them abroad, or taking from abroad, let's say from Bitstamp, and converting it back. So most of this spread is cost, And if we were able to predict the general direction of the market, if it's mostly buying or mostly selling, we could tighten it. But for the past months, it has been very difficult to understand where this market is going, and this spread reflects that. Now, having said that, we are not going to stay with those numbers for a long time. We have, specifically for higher amounts of transactions, the transactions that we see are coming now from high net worth individuals that are buying by the tens of thousands of dollars. These spreads are not there for long. We're beginning to have channels. This is too soon to announce, but it's already in a pilot phase. Beginning to have channels to have much streamlined liquidity coming in, and the spreads will be lower. So again, it's maybe a sort of apology. What we want is to have a company that is here for the long term, so that people can buy and sell bitcoins now and in a year and in 5 years, etc. So we're adapting ourselves to the market and the constraints of the market. I hope it answers your question.
So in general, Israel is a small market and it takes time to build this infrastructure to lower the prices and lower the spread. That's basically it. Anything else, or we'll continue to chat a little bit more? Yeah?
So I'm Shaul from Bits of Gold. My question is for Zach, actually. Do you have any plans to make a ATM that actually recycles bills so that it would be more self-sufficient for countries which are unbanked?
Yes, it's definitely something that we're interested in. In general, oh yeah, sorry, I'll repeat the question. The question was if we have any plans to use a recycling module for our machine. A recycling module takes the cash going in, stores it, and then is able to use that same cash and dispense it as well. And what that enables operators of the machine to do is they can, at least theoretically, put a machine on an island and then people just come in and out without having to have any banking relations or possibly even services if you have the algorithms right to figure in the ins and outs. It would kind of be its own market-making machine. The truth is the good recyclers are quite expensive. So the bank-rate recyclers for the machine itself would cost more than the total amount of our machines right now. So it's something we're looking into as kind of a high-capacity premium machine. But it's something that we also have to try to think of, what people want to pay for these machines and where would they place where it really makes sense. We do have machines that have acceptors and dispensers separately, so you just need to have somebody who goes and takes the cash out of one and then separately puts into the other, which may be, at least in the beginning, cheaper than getting a dispenser. But it's definitely something that we're thinking about, and at the same time thinking about how we incorporate this in developing countries. I mean, there are 2.5 billion unbanked people that we really want to get to that all use cash, and many of them don't have banks, so cash is really the only way to get to them. On the other hand, the cost of manpower will be a lot lower than, say, a $15,000 machine for a while. So maybe there's a way to kind of use tablets, etc., or kind of get into, in a sense, human ATMs on that side, and have the machines on the sending side, and then you can have remittance services that can be really fast and without going through the banking system, and have rates that are way lower than MoneyGram, Western Union, etc., way more convenient. So I'm not sure that recyclers would definitely be the immediate solution in developing countries, but it's definitely something we're looking to with when it comes to remittance and handling cash in a more efficient way.
Thank you. Sure, go ahead.
Sure. Question for Mr. Zach Harvey. So you guys are obviously in a lot of different countries with a lot of jurisdictions. I'm curious, two-part question, I guess. One, where are you seeing the highest volumes? And two, where is it easiest for your operators, so in terms of just getting set up? And is there a correlation between high volume and easy jurisdiction to get set up?
All right, thanks, Gabe. Two-part question. The first question is where are we seeing the most volume through our machines, and the second one is how easy it is to operate the machines from a regulatory standpoint, and if there's any correlation between the two. So the first part is we're seeing the most volume in Canada, actually. We've also sold the most machines to Canada, way more than we've actually sold to the US and more than any other country. We are seeing anywhere that our machines are placed, whether 5, 6 machines in Montreal, the same in Ontario, they're all doing well, they're all profitable. And then on the other hand, we do have machines that are launched in the US, which takes a lot longer due to the regulatory environment in the US. It takes our operators a lot longer usually to get set up, depending on the state, of course. But once they do, they see high volume as well. On the machines we have in Massachusetts, right around Harvard and MIT are doing very well. The machine we have in New York City is doing well. But actually, pretty much everywhere in the world where our machines are located, as long as they're in a convenient place for people to get to, high foot traffic areas, they're doing well. So our machine, we just had a machine that launched in Budapest in Hungary, and it's doing great. And it wasn't too difficult for them from a regulatory standpoint. Same in Hong Kong. We have several machines that are doing great. Australia is the same. We have a lot of machines there that are doing very well. And up until this point, it's been very simple from a regulatory standpoint.
And
there's now a new issue.
Bitcoin embassy too.
And of course,
the Bitcoin embassy in Israel.
Bitcoin embassy in Israel.
It's been fun.
Right.
We actually see people coming in. There was a line of people wanting to buy the Bitcoins, and sometimes you have these moments where you need to replenish your ATM machine, and then you need to wait for a block. And we had these situations where people are in line, everybody's waiting for a block, and this is a call for all the entrepreneurs in the room. We're thinking of making a block waiting game. So while you're waiting for your block, it will be a massive online block waiting game. We're still figuring out how to make it fun, but you need to wait for that block to confirm in order to replenish your ATM machine.
I have another small question, and it was interesting what you said about Canada. Do you know why the Canadians are so into ATMs?
Well, first of all, like the U.S. And Israel, they're very entrepreneurial. And it sometimes seems that other places in the world, like for instance Europe, are a little slower to the game as far as entrepreneurism is concerned. So they kind of have the North American entrepreneurial spirit, but on the other hand, their government isn't as harsh when it comes to financial regulation. So they're a lot more laid back. So while in the US people have concerns that if I do something a bit wrong, I'll be threatened with 20 or 30 years in jail, in Canada they don't have that same concern. They can start doing something, and if there's an issue, they'll go and talk to their regulators and figure it out amicably, which in the US isn't the case. So I think that's the reason that it hasn't exploded as quickly in the US. It's starting to ramp up a bit more now, but in Canada, just right off the bat. I mean, I think we've shipped about 40, 50 machines to Canada, and they're, one by one, they're launching, and that's way more than any other country. I think second place is probably Australia, which is, I mean, not sure exactly why. Maybe it always seems like the English-speaking countries are a bit more entrepreneurial, but Australia as well. I mean, we've have more, per capita, of course, more than pretty much any country besides Canada.
That's cool.
So I have one last comment about, we're discussing about buying bitcoins and selling bitcoins at the consumer level, but what we're not discussing and not seeing on our exchanges are the very large transactions that are happening OTC, over the counter. So those transactions are moving millions of dollars every day, and they use the prices of the exchanges of the world to move the money around. This is in the financial world, they look at it as a bit of a problem, because when you look at volumes on the largest exchanges, those volumes, if you have an amount of sufficient amount of money, you could use that money to lower the price at the official exchange, and then go and do your OTC transaction on behind the scenes. So this is something that we don't usually discuss, but it's happening as we speak. It's one of the explanations that people are moving forward to explain the really crazy rate variation of these.
You have a theory about the
it's not my theory, but I actually happen to have some data points that show that there are large transactions going on in parallel to what we know in our exchanges in the exchanges in the world. I think that triggered a very interested question over there. You immediately raise your hand.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I want your comment on the ability of larger exchanges, like the 3 big exchanges in China, that are able to manipulate the prices with things that are not on the blockchain. And I want to hear your...
So the question was, are Chinese exchanges able to manipulate data because... so you said not on the blockchain. I will correct that. The blockchain is just a settlement place where bitcoins are moving around. But those places are publishing their data in an open manner. The data might be very opaque, but the publishing is open. So I don't have any comment on those exchanges. I've heard rumors on practices where you would have the volume pegged at 20,000 bitcoins minimum, and then it's 20,100, 20,050, and
let me say it out loud. I don't believe the volumes. I don't. Yeah, I think they're lying.
It's something that you can do when you're still in an unregulated world where people are looking at those rates as if they're information, but the rate is not overseen by sufficient tools to reassure you that this is legit. It's very easy to inject small transactions to move the volumes. Regarding the rate variation, this is, I believe most laws around the world would go against that as it is right now. So I don't think it's lawful to go around and manipulate rates when you have a stake. But I'm not a lawyer, and this is where the industry is very, very young and has a lot to promise.
Well, I think more than solving this by laws, one solution is more decentralization. And as we remember from the Mt. Gox days, when the price was 30 and started crashing, they shut down. There wasn't a Bitcoin price all of a sudden. And everybody relied on their numbers for the price. And now it's a little bit better. You have a few more exchanges, but in essence it's still the same issue. You have several centralized exchanges who are, their price discoveries.
But we did move from one big exchange to 3 or 4.
Right, it's a good start.
Do you think it's going to keep decentralizing the exchange?
Well, yeah. I mean, Shaul mentioned the kind of self-sufficient Bitcoin ATMs. If we start seeing those popping up all around, they can have their own price discovery systems. And then instead of having 4, 5, 10 exchanges, you have thousands of micro exchanges all over. And it's a lot more honest. And I mean, another issue with exchanges that people have to be concerned about is fractional reserve, when they're not supposed to be. Do they actually have all the money? Do they have the $1,000 you put in there?
You're right.
Are they actually kind of just using that to manipulate the market? So there are several exchanges that have gone out of their way to kind of prove that they're not fractional reserve.
I think it's going to be a standard very soon. It's customers.
I know of CoinFloor in the UK that have done it, and Kraken have done it as well, I believe.
Do you guys think
we are also doing it?
Yeah, are we over Gox now? I mean, it's been a while, right? Are we officially over Gox, or is it going to weigh on our sphere for a very long time? I actually want to know what the public thinks about it. is Gox a distant, Mt. Gox a distant memory, or is it very vivid? So raise your hand.
Okay, Jonathan, we'll try to find out during the rest of the conference because our time is up. So thank you very much, guys. It was always a pleasure. Thank you guys for your time.